Greetings. Thank you. I want to take an opportunity to thank EcoMotion for organizing this opportunity to talk about a conversation around roadways and how these are being really at the forefront of some incredible innovation and technology to really influence the way we get from here to there, but the ways in which we live our lives. My name is Marisa Walker. I'm a Senior Vice President at the Arizona Commerce Authority. It's the state's economic development organization. And in that capacity, I direct an Institute of Automated Mobility that really is working to catalyze the cooperation and partnership between the public and private sector so that we can integrate these, in this case, automated vehicles more safely into our roadway system. We've taken a lot of thought to put together a really interesting group of panelists today, distinguished experts in their own right. They bring a really unique perspective at various scales around how the roadways are being optimized. Long just thought of from the context of concrete and asphalt. Roadways are really at the focal point right now of how we're layering technology onto them to, of course, make things more safe and more efficient in how we get to places, but also how we're thinking about where we want to live and how we want to experience that mobility. I know here in Arizona, we have one of the first communities in the United States that's being built without any intentionality around vehicles. And so it really puts a high focus on different forms of mobility that have less impact and allow for people to come together in unique and different ways. What I thought would be helpful is if I could turn to each one of the panelists, maybe have them do a quick self-introduction, and maybe provide just a little bit of context about how they got to their position. All of these individuals are innovation strategists, directors in their own right, and so it probably makes for a really interesting trajectory on how they got to where they're at right now. Gonzalo, let me go ahead and turn to you.
Thanks, Marisa. I'm Gonzalo Hila. I work for the International Road Federation in Geneva, Switzerland. We are an independent, global, and not-for-profit organization, and we have been working since '48, so since a long time. And our goal is to represent the interest of the road infrastructure sector in trying to develop networks of roads for sustainable mobility for all. And our main pillars of activities are three. The first one is related to knowledge, sharing information, building knowledge and sharing it through our members and with our members and partners around the world. The second one is building a network. Of course, through the years, we have met a lot of individuals, entities, organizations that are advocating for the same reasons we are. And we just connect people, businesses, and everyone together to foster a little bit innovation and the topics we deal with. And the last one is the advocacy, of course. We advocate for safer roads and more sustainable roads. It's an important topic for us, and we put a lot of effort in doing that. On my particular role, I'm leading all the innovation activities, and connected to this topic, I'm working on trying to understand how the roads are going to evolve in the future, especially considering the whole transitioning period we are facing with all these new trends that are affecting us heavily. And yeah, I look forward to this panel and to discuss further what is coming ahead of us.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Hila, maybe I can turn to you.
Hi, I'm Hila. I'm VP Strategy and Innovation of Netivei Israel, which is the Israeli biggest government-owned company. The company is in charge of the interurban network of roads in Israel. And for that, she has more than 8,000 kilometers of road we are in charge of. So my role is to try to understand how the future will look like mobility-wise, and then let the company, help the company have the right tools and knowledge to deal with it and make our roads ready for this enthusiastic period. So I'm dealing with all road aspects. I'm an aerospace engineer in my background, so I have a vision of how can it look like looking at the space engineering, etc. So this is me.
Nicola, can I turn to you?
Thank you very much, Marisa. It's a great pleasure to be here in this panel at EcoMotion and to have the possibility to introduce a little bit myself and, of course, the City of Turin Innovation Department, which I represent today. So my role within Turin is the head of the innovation team. Turin is the third city in Italy in terms of economic magnitude, a city really connected with the automotive industry, first historically, and today with the transition towards a smart mobility. We consider ourselves a smart city within an international context. We are trying to develop new approaches, new strategies to create better services for our stakeholders, which in principle are our citizens. Turin is counting more or less 1 million people as inhabitants. We have about 75,000 companies within the perimeter of and the spectrum of the city. So, of course, we have business stakeholders, and we have quite a lot of research and development institutions and organizations with 2 main universities and a number of satellite research centers. So, in essence, I would like to say or to flag that Turin is a research and technology city. We have really an innovation culture and an innovation background. And we are today ahead of a number of very important challenges for our city and for our stakeholders. Our goal is to become a home for emerging technologies. So we are trying to practice the paradigm of connecting the city with emerging technologies and creating positive impact in terms of innovation and services to our citizens. So I'm really looking forward to contribute to this panel today and share our experience with my colleagues.
Thank you, Nicola. We're glad you're here too. Gonzalo, I thought maybe I could turn to you first. I really appreciated your comments on the opening around really trying to think about what the future is going to look like relative to transportation and having to do it at a scale, an international scale, no less. Could you talk a little bit about some of the concrete activities that you guys are involved in?
Yes, sure. Well, let me just take a step back and take you 2 years ago, when we have indicated that perhaps on the topics related to autonomous vehicles and what is the impact on the roads, we have understand at that point that most of the focus was on the vehicle side, but not in the infrastructure side. So we decided at that moment to launch a dedicated committee. It's called the Connecting and Autonomous Mobility Committee. It's led by the IRF, in collaboration with the European Union Road Federation and the European Association of Tollways Operators in Europe, ASECAP. And the mission of that group is somehow to understand what is going to be the role of the road infrastructure sector when we are dealing with connected and autonomous vehicles. So last year, we set up a number of meetings with some partners and members of this committee in order to understand which are the main challenges and which are the topics that we think we need to address, and to foster a little bit more innovation and spread the knowledge we have gathered through these experts. And recently we have launched a manifesto which summarizes some of these key findings. And it is important because it's divided into three main topics. The first one is the regulatory framework, which is, of course, is important because we need to set up somehow the norms and the standards and the specifications to incentivize and promote the development of these technologies. And one of the findings we find on doing this exercise is that the technological evolution of the vehicles and the infrastructures are different. So the vehicles are moving in one speed and the infrastructure is a little bit slower. So we need somehow to find the right balance in order to mix them and make them cooperate. And of course, this is also complex for authorities in setting up the policies to incentivize these topics. So we need to help them a little bit better as well to understand, to help them understand how they can promote and incentivize and make things go a little bit faster. And that's important. And one key aspect of the regulatory framework is that the legislation is not there, right? The human is not there anymore inside the vehicle. So there are a number of challenges that need to be solved. But a lot of progress on that topic is moving, and we hope that we will see progress as well. The second point of the manifesto is about the social skills and the future workforce. So what are going to be the skills of the people that perhaps today have a job, but in the future, with the inclusion of these technologies and all the changes that are going to come, perhaps they need to shift from what they're going to do today to something different, and we need to prepare them. We need to build programs and build reskilling activities in order to make sure that these people are going to be trained when the moment arrives. And the last one is related to the technological innovations, which is perhaps the most trivial one, where we are going to identify which are the common innovation that we need to develop further and the breakthrough technologies, and how this is going to be integrated with the vehicles, with the infrastructure, and make them talk some way. Of course, this is not going to happen from one day to another one. There is going to be a long transitional period, but we are here to support that. So this is a big topic of activities and a big chunk of my time. I'm fully dedicated to this, and I'm happy. I invite people to download this document and share feedback if there is any.
That's great. Thanks, Gonzalo. Hila, I'm curious, you take it to another level as well. You work for one, as you mentioned in your introduction, one of the largest transportation companies in a country, Israel, which is known far and wide for its focus on innovation and startups. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on. And I'm also really curious, since you have such a huge network to cover, how do you bridge the urban and rural divide as part of those efforts?
So as you all know, Israel is known as the startup nation, but our challenge, because we're speaking about infrastructure, and I'm sure you all will agree with me, the problem in infrastructure is the implementation of this innovation. We can do a lot of proof of concept and a lot of pilots here and there, but bringing it into a full scale and real implementation inside the infrastructure, this is the hard step. And as Gonzalo said, it's going to be a long process. So to make the first step on this very long process, this year, in a joint venture with an Israeli NGO named the Israeli Living Lab, we are about to have a big project, a big pilot, in the north entrance to Tel Aviv metropolitan area, which is the crowded metropolitan of Israel, joining a lot of new technologies together, data technologies and other technologies, which will help us understand exactly what is going on this road. We try to imagine how the road will look like in 2030 with all the technologies that we think that will be mature enough then, and we want to see how the synergy between them helping us to manage the road better, the asphalt better. We have the same asphalt wide, but we want to have more cars or more people going around, on it. So it will be more efficient. So we will be having it on about 15 kilometers, more than 8 different startups with different kinds of sensors and data and algorithms joining all together to bring us different dashboards for different traffic managers, public transportation managers, etc. And we will build it for the next half year, and then in 2022, all around the year, we will try to understand what is the main effect of it, which regulation in Israel we need to change in order to actually manage the road, to change the kinds of lane, only bus lane, etc., and change it through the day, understand how we will do it, how we will let the people know, the public know what's the regulation according to this minute, and how it's affecting transportation in all around this road. So this is our main project next year. And as you said, we have a very diverse road network. We have desert, we have road on the desert, and we have roads with snow. So we have to look for very, very different technologies in order to find very diverse problems and challenges. And what we are trying to do is to understand the main problem of each area, and then challenge the market with a specific criteria of the problem, and the Israeli market can bring us very interesting solutions for different challenges. But we understand that we have to find, there is no one solution for all the network. In every area, we should implement other technologies, but it makes my work very interesting from day to day. So I think this is the main thing about what you asked.
That's so interesting, Hila. It sounds like really what you guys are creating on this roadway leading into Tel Aviv is a real innovation zone where you can really test out a proving ground, so to speak, of various technologies and what's going to work in the right context and the right scenarios.
It's going to be an open data to all the startup community in Israel and worldwide. It's going to be an open data, because part of what we start or we want to learn from this project is what the world can do with this data. You know, we're having a lot of data. I think Nicola will agree with me. We are gathering a lot of data from many sensors, and we don't really understand what we can do with this data. And just by bringing it out to the world, we will understand who can use and which data he needs for doing it, and make us more smarter about it and about how sharing it with the public.
Wow, that's great. Well, Nicola, this is a great setup. I definitely want to do a dive into data. I suspect as a smart community, a smart region, this is at the forefront of a lot of what you're thinking. But I was hoping that you made some remarks when you were opening up about just the culture of innovation with your academic institutions and really how your community sees itself as an innovator. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got there. I mean, and a little bit about what you guys are doing. I was really impressed to see all the different ways that you're looking at mobility, whether it's, well, in some ways I describe it as regardless of altitude. It's not only self-driving vehicles, but you're also looking at urban air mobility or advanced air mobility. So anyway, if you could talk a little bit about that, and then I'd love to dig in a little bit around some of the data and privacy issues actually too.
Absolutely. Thanks for raising this point, Marisa. And of course, I do agree with the Hila, and I pick up from her this starting point, which in the case of Turin has been the Turin Living Lab. Again, it's a pan-European project and framework, which is looking at the life in the future and looking at how experimentation with data, with new technology, with new solutions can empower local institutions, companies, and citizens to better adapt and improve their life conditions within the journey and the life journey that all the cities and all the territories are doing. This journey is certainly featured by change. We have some incremental changes, as in the case of innovation, and some more radical changes. And in the past 15 months, we have seen how a radical change or set of changes can derive from an exogenous shock, as the pandemic has been worldwide. The role of the cities, so if we want to look at the positive side of this, the role of the cities in those macro and global circumstances, I would say have been even more important, since what we have seen is that the city, and in particular, we talk today, the cities going and embracing new technologies. They become the new hubs in which people can find solutions to a number of problems. I think the data are part of the equation. So data are intrinsic in this new city lab and experimentation, urban experimentation scenario. In Turin, we have been moving from a living lab to a city lab over the last 5 years in particular. And this strategy has been in particular led by the city. So the local municipality and our innovation team in particular have worked together to shape the city and give the city a new identity and positioning. And this new positioning is the city is willing, A, to be an enabler for innovation, which means try to connect the dots and connect the demand and offer of innovation. And on the other hand, the city is trying to support smart communities, which typically are bottom-up group of individuals or organizations willing to change for the good, willing to bring novelty into the market, and therefore, at urban scale, they are fostering experimentation as a mean to improve the quality of life. So in our opinion, a smart city is shifting towards smart communities, and therefore innovation at urban scale is happening in a more diffused and distributed way. That's why today we speak about smart districts. So in different parts of a territory, of a city, of a region, or even of a nation, what you have is a different skill set, a different concentration and distribution of investments for innovation. And this is mainly shaped by some decisions that are taken at research and at industrial level. So the role of cities within this map is to connect the demand and offer of opportunity and foster, in a way, an innovation culture towards experimentation, innovation. And of course, one of the centers, one of the main domain in which this experimentation is happening at city level, and in particular in Turin, is smart mobility. And I just want to add a flavor here because as Marisa, as you said before, our vision for smart mobility is a multidimensional vision, which means we move from smart road. Turin has been the first city in Italy to pre-authorize a 35-kilometer urban circuit to test connected and autonomous vehicles. Then we move the scale to the skies. So we speak about urban air mobility to refer to all those experimentations and innovations happening enabled by drone technology and all the related technologies to enable drones to fly either piloted or in automatic flights. So we have 5G, we have IoT, we have sensors, we have edge computing, and we have a whole infrastructure, as Hila was mentioning before. And indeed, the complexity is really in the infrastructure. And last bit is, again, the next level from skies, which is space. So space economy is booming. Space economy and space mobility will become, in our opinion, a continuation of urban air mobility. And there are some infrastructural economies of scope that cities can somehow capitalize on, and they can use to create opportunities in terms of jobs, research, innovation to be developed into these R&D centers.
Nicola, just following up on that, I got the impression when Hila was talking about having an open source, really creating a community to come around to help not only infuse guidance or feedback about how it can be used, but make them feel part of the process, and that has to be beneficial and helpful in the implementation of innovation. Has that been some of the work that you guys have been doing in Turin? Has that been helpful for the community to feel a part of it because you're taking a community-wide perspective, but also drilling it down to the unique context of almost the individual communities within Turin? Could you talk a little bit about how you're engaging communities to be part of this conversation?
Yes, I think that we have at least two macro levels, a B2B sort of engagement when we speak about these kind of big changes, and a B2C public acceptance of innovation, because that's also a key part. In Turin, we have been trying to go in parallel with those routes, because of course, B2B is generating the higher impact, at least at short to mid-term. But then you need to make sure that your citizens and your communities, first, they understand what the city is doing or enabling, and second, eventually use part of the innovation deriving from a POC, from experimentations, and so forth. So the public acceptance of innovation is something that we try to embed as a module in all the projects and experimentations that we run, in particular in the mobility level. For example, last year we have launched a autonomous vehicle shuttle service within one of the campus inside of Turin, which is, by the way, a UN campus. And the need there has been to figure out a controlled environment for this vehicle to move through different stops and carry people working into this campus, but also make sure that we were able to measure in a way the reactions of the public, of the end user towards this kind of innovation. And what we could see is that data, so measurement happening through feedback, through surveys, through different kind of touch points embedded into this experimentation, have been really important to give us a picture about the maturity of our consumer space, which is most of the times our citizen space, towards the experimentations and innovations that we as a city are proposing and pushing eventually. So data could be certainly very useful for this. Most recently, we have started to run some town hall meetings in the sense of creating some groups of people, some qualitative groups of people, and discussing with them their perception based on a number of verticals, from smart road to urban air mobility to industry 4.0 to innovative urban services, for example, just to mention a few of them. This is going to be a process, not just a single event, because as long as innovation continues, as long as a smart city transformation continues, we need to make sure that we are able to consider and use data coming from these qualitative groups for decision making. And decision making goes into the direction of inclusion, of even social innovation and high impact from emerging technology to the end user space that we have, which for a city is primarily the citizen community.
Thanks, Nicola. We only really have a few minutes left, but Gonzalo, as I'm listening to this conversation, I'm struck by, we're in this really unique period with all innovation that goes through where you're really trying to allow it to be technologies explored in the correct scenario, in the correct context. But at some point, for us to be able to scale a lot of this technology, we're going to have the regulatory environment in place that's going to allow things not to stop at one border versus another jurisdiction. And I know this is something that we're struggling with here in the United States because, for instance, in our state, our governor has taken a very strong approach around not wanting to hinder innovation, certainly keep our roadways safe, but allow a lot of testing, a lot of demonstration to take place as these technologies mature. But what we're also cognizant of is that we don't want a patchwork where you, in our case, drive between one state to the next and you got a completely different environment, which could be really challenging for some of these companies then to really deploy on a larger scale. I suspect this keeps you up a little bit at night, and I'm just kind of curious to see what you're thinking about relative to what the future is going to look like in the regulatory space and how we get there.
Well, of course, there will be challenges because people will like to move. I mean, and going to A to B in some cases mean going from one country to another one. And luckily in Europe, that's not a main issue for the moment. There are a lot of experimentations and a lot of initiatives working on this topic as well. There are famous corridor going from Vienna to Rotterdam that is going through 3 countries. A lot of stakeholders involved on the topic has been working for years in order to make sure that the interoperability issues are somehow agreed and they're solved and right from the design of these roads. I think it's important that the collaboration is there, and we need to involve every stakeholder that is part of that journey, from the vehicles to the road users as well, and the infrastructures that are somehow responsible for setting up this scenario that is going to where everything is going to happen. But I'm sleeping well at night. I don't think that will be an issue. I think, of course, each country has its own complexities. The scenarios might differ. But if you think about the next, I always like to think in 100 years, what is going to be the infrastructure? I think everything is going to be more digitalized, and that will bring a lot of advantages, right? Because we don't have to deal with the physical infrastructure that takes a lot of time to change or to adapt. But perhaps in the future, everything is going to disappear. We won't be able to see the signs on the roads. All that information will come from a center that will send that to the vehicles, and adapting that will be much easier than adapting a sign that is physically on the road. And I think we are moving towards that direction. And I think if we are doing the right thing, that shouldn't be an issue.
Well, I have to say, I'm sad to see this panel come to a close. I feel like we're just now starting to scratch even a lot of the various subjects. So hopefully with EcoMotion, we can look to institutionalize this conversation for next year. But I want to take the opportunity to again thank each of you for participating on this panel. You really not only provide a lot of clarity and a lot of excitement about the projects and initiatives that you're working on, but Gonzalo in particular, just love the way you kind of close that out, because I think the future is going to be quite interesting, and I think it's going to look quite a bit different. And so I'm looking forward to having this discussion going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Hope to see you all in Tel Aviv next year.
Thank you very much. Yes, hopefully so.